And the courts determined that the Liberals had engaged effectively in election fraud.
Hello and welcome to the Feminine as Fuck podcast. I'm your host, Monica Yates, a period and ICF certified women's life coach, and I help women to harness the power of their period and connect to their feminine flow. In these episodes, we will be talking about all things periods, hormones, confidence, health, food, money, sex, business, feminine flow, your brain, energy, and all the stuff that goes through our heads. You will walk away from each episode with new chicken nuggets and truth bombs, as I don't have a filter and I love talking about all the shit that people are thinking but too afraid to say.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast. So today, I've actually got Dad on the podcast. We're all feeling a little bit helpless with the massive Australian fires, and I wanted to get Dad on because, I'm not very politically, what's the word, Dad? Savvy, educated, screwed on, that sort of stuff. But Dad helps dumb down things for me, and I understand things only because of him. And so I wanted you all to be able to understand things because of him as well, because I feel like things just on the news get very confusing and distorted, and we don't know what to believe. So if you haven't listened to episode 28, that was a talk with Dad as well about what's really going on below the surface that we see in the media and stuff with politics, but we went even further in it. We rocked the fucking boat. There was no fear of not rocking the boat. There was some good little hint, nudge without actually saying the stuff in there, so listen carefully. It is a long episode, but it's jam-packed with things that you could be doing so that we are not just having this band-aid from a band-aid effect post the fires, but actually making change forever, getting these dick munchers out of politics and having people that have ethical and moral standards in there. So please, from the bottom of my heart, share this episode. Share it. All you need to do, if you're listening to it on Spotify, you can actually really easily share it to your Instagram story. But if you can just screenshot it and put it on your Instagram story, it takes, guys, 5 seconds, right? If you can fucking put a picture of your dog on your Instagram story, you can screenshot this shit. It will allow other people to then feel a little bit less helpless, to have a bit more education, to actually know what the fuck is going on in politics that isn't being put on the media, but Dad knows about. So please share this episode on Facebook, email it, text it to your friends. I don't care what you do. Share it. Because the only way that we're going to be able to make some change is if people get this information so that we can make massive change. Now, there's some references that we talk about in the podcast episode. They're all going to be linked in the description. If they're not there already, it's because Shelby hasn't gotten to it yet, because I'm posting this literally straight after we've recorded it. So check back in a couple of days. And if you have any questions, I know you can follow Dad on Twitter. He does have an Instagram page, and I'm going to get him more into Instagram. If you've got questions, though, you can send them to me and I'll just ask him for a reply. But I hope this helps answer a lot of your questions, and thank you all for sending them in. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast. Today, for the second time, we've got Dad here. Oliver Yates is his name. And the reason why I've been kind of asking, can you come back on? Because I understand that right now with the fires in Australia and just with the way the whole political situation is, it's really confusing. And for a lot of us, we're feeling helpless. We don't know what to do besides donate. And there is more that we can do, but we aren't talking about it because a lot of us don't actually know. I wouldn't know a lot of these things I wouldn't know a lot of these things if I didn't have Dad as a dad, but because I've got him, he explains a lot of things to me. Now, I am by no means politically that savvy or that educated, which for me is kind of an advantage in terms of this podcast, because we're going to dumb things down. If I understand it, you'll understand it, basically. So in today's podcast, we are going to be talking about the fires, the kind of fucked up political scenario that we have right now, what we can actually do to stop these fires forever and not just a band-aid effect, and then whatever else kind of comes up. So, Dad, welcome.
Welcome, everybody. Nice to be here again.
Yes, and I think, Dad, if you haven't listened to Dad's previous episode, it was towards the beginning of my series. We'll link it in the description. So the first question, actually to start right now, Dad, with the fires. So obviously, they're really horrendous. I read something this morning saying they're not going to stop until March or April. Just first thing that comes to mind, what are your thoughts about the fires right now?
Well, unfortunately, the fires were pretty predictable. They're absolutely caused by climate change and a rise in temperatures. Our landscape has had fires, and we had them periodically, and we've had some pretty extensive fires from time to time. But we all know we live in an environment with lots and lots of eucalypts, and we also know that when they're under stress and they're particularly dry, which is what we've been seeing with a drying climate and also increasing temperatures. I mean, last year was the hottest year on record. Every year over the last 10 years, it's almost been hotter and hotter and hotter. You end up with much worse fires. And this is a trend which will continue and which was well known to the government well before these fires started. So the main thing to really understand is that scientists have been talking about this desperate concern that they've had about escalating fire risk. And we do have sensible long-range forecasts. And back in April this year, the fire chiefs and the ex-fire chiefs with 650 years of experience all wrote to the Prime Minister explaining to them what they expected
and
this fire season.
And nothing was fucking done.
Nothing was done, and they even refused, the Prime Minister or any of his staff refused to meet with the ex-fire chiefs to understand how they should plan for this fire season, because they were personally and directly concerned with their experience about how bad this fire season was.
Okay, so why don't we know about this? Why isn't this, why does it take us having these raging fires for us to even look at the idea of, maybe our Prime Minister isn't the guy that he puts himself out to be?
Well,
why aren't we hearing about this shit? And I know you know a lot of it, and why aren't we hearing about it?
Well, I think a lot of people do know that the government was forewarned about this, and a lot of people do understand the science of climate change and the fact that increasing temperatures will lead to increasing droughts and things dry out under increasing temperatures. And it's not difficult to work out that you go to gum trees and they're a lot drier, and you have a lightning events or a fire event, they will be stronger and they'll be more intense. This is pure rational science that's playing out. The question is people wanted to ignore it. People don't want to believe that this is the impact, but there's nothing surprising in this impact. The fires are horrific, but when you have average temperatures much higher than what they were and you have a drought season like we've had, it is very well known that this was likely to be a horrific year for fires, which is the reason why the fire chiefs spent a lot of time trying to brief the government and get the government to prepare for this fire season that they expected to be horrific, and actually has proved to be probably even worse than their expectation. So they could have been planned for a lot better than what it was.
So what about when people say, it's natural though to have the different phases where it gets warmer, and then like I was saying the other night, the Ice Age, and you explain that's 40,000 years or whatever.
Yeah, well...
What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, the thing is the change in temperature. Yes, the world has changed in temperature over, generally 40,000 year cycles. But we've never had a change in temperature as fast as what we are doing it, and we know what it is caused by, and it is caused by trapping heat in the earth, which is caused by the release of greenhouse gases, which basically create a blanket around the earth, and this is, again, nothing more than pure science. We retain more heat in the earth, and as you retain more heat, obviously, what happens if the sun keeps putting in the same amount of heat every day, and if you end up retaining more heat as a result of having that blanket, you will get hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. And that's exactly all that's going on here. It's been known for ages. The first was 1985, actually was the first time the Labor Cabinet, this was brought to the Labor Cabinet in 1985 by Barry Jones, that Australia needed to start to take seriously the impacts on our country as a result of man-made climate change. And so man-made climate change, when they talk about that, it is climate change caused by the emissions that man is putting into the atmosphere from our coal-fired power stations and our cars and our ammonia plants and our factories. If they're not running on renewable fuels, then they will be emitting a gas into the atmosphere which is creating a thicker and thicker blanket around the planet.
Okay, so obviously this is we could get so into the climate change stuff. What is the biggest factor for climate change? Because you've got people out there saying it's all the meat, it's because we're eating meat, and then there's also the massive companies that pump out the pollution, and there's the cars and the planes, and what's the biggest factor in climate change?
Well, the biggest factor in climate change is our own actions as individuals, as humans, and the biggest activity that we do which causes the emission of those gases, which cause that blanket effect, happens to be the production of electricity through the burning of coal, is currently the largest source of emissions.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean we don't have very large sources of emissions coming from other activities that mankind undertakes. I mean, aircraft emissions are massive. The production of ammonia, which is what we use in fertiliser and we use for explosives, is a massive contributor.
Okay.
About the largest cause of emissions
is electricity.
Is the consumption. Is the consumption of coal. The burning of coal is the largest form of emission. So that's why, for people that understand why there is a focus on coal, is that is the largest contributor.
Got it. That's why we want renewable
gas,
energy.
and that's why people talk about coal and not wanting to see more coal. Now, there's two types of coal. There's metallurgical coal, which is used for steel production, and there's coal used purely for the purposes of burning for electricity.
Right.
At the moment, there is no economic reason why anybody would be burning coal for electricity production, given how cheap renewables are now. That wasn't the case 10 years ago.
Okay.
Renewables were more expensive, but clearly today renewables are the answer for the production of electricity.
Right.
So that's one part of the challenge done. But you've got to take this in a orchestrated way. You need to wind down the amount of emissions that we are causing, and you need to go sector by sector, and you want to reduce emissions in those sectors where you can do it as cheaply as possible. That's the logical thing to do. You don't pick the most expensive area to reduce emissions. You pick the cheapest area to reduce emissions, which is the reason why we'll never be building any more coal-fired power stations, and our coal-fired power stations will have to shut down a lot faster than what this government believes.
Okay, so two things. I want to quickly mention about Adani because I feel like that could maybe come into it really quickly as well. Can we just quickly talk about your court case and how, and just give a little recap to everybody because most people won't have known about that or understood what the point of it was. Okay. So let's quickly go on that, which actually kind of comes off our last episode.
Yeah, that's a big jump. So we're going to move away from.
Well, and then we'll do the Q&A.
Yeah,
then we'll do all the questions.
Fine. So to the court case. So
just so people can get some context of you.
Yeah. So as people or may be aware, I obviously stood as an independent candidate in the seat of Kooyong last year, and I did that predominantly because the year before, at the end of the year before, I was asking people to do everything that they could possibly do and use their skills that they have to try and change our path. In other words, so that we do take climate action. And I thought, well, one of the things that I could do was to try and give people a choice at the election time as to whom they should vote for. So that's the reason I stood in Kooyong. Now, politics is normally interesting, but interesting I'd describe as what people think is quite ugly. And to be honest, it was a very, very ugly campaign.
It was super ugly. From what I experienced, it was really ugly.
It was ugly. It was actually a real shock to me as to how awful the parties, in particular the Liberal Party, who was the main opposition, played during the election campaign. And during the election campaign, they did a number of things, but one of them was come out with statements which, looked like they were grossly misleading and deceptive, to convince voters to vote for them.
Yeah.
And I challenged them on that point, and they sent me back a legal opinion saying that it's their legal right to be misleading and deceptive in relation to the information that they give to people about how they about how they decide who to vote for. So in other words, they can tell you absolute and total crap and make anything that they want to make you vote for them, even if it's completely and intentionally untrue. That is clearly the law, and that is currently the law. But it was clear there was one. What gets
me is there is a law of misleading deceptive conduct, and it's like
every other business in the world,
but except for them.
Except for them, that's right. Except for politics. Now that's because people say, "Oh, it's the argy-bargy of politics of how you win people." Is that people should be stupid enough not to fall for this stuff, but people obviously fall for this stuff. Yeah. But there was one exception to that rule, which said that you couldn't engage in activity where you try and fool people on how they should place their vote. Okay. And what the Liberal Party did, in the last desperate efforts, is they put up signs, in coloured AEC signs around. So
AEC is the Australian Electoral Commission. Which is the governing body that organises everything.
Basically, pretending to be the government authority that's responsible for running true and fair elections, saying that the only way and the correct way to vote is to put one in the Liberal box and then fill all the other boxes out. That was a step that was far too far.
And it was written in Mandarin or Chinese?
Written in Chinese, Mandarin.
And the other thing that you also mentioned to me ages ago was another reason why the Chinese people would listen to that 100% was because they live in a country where if they are told to do something, they have to do it.
Well, no, the issue is that culturally, a lot of people have arrived in Australia, and some of them are new Australians. And when you're barraged through social media where they were that one candidate was the best candidate, and when you're told that actually in the case of Chisholm, Gladys Liu, who was the candidate, was on national television being announced by the Chinese government as actually won the election before the election.
Whoa,
and then when you arrive
that.
at the polling booth, then you see a directive sign, and it was drafted in a Mandarin form, which was authoritatively telling you to put 1 in the Liberal box. I think a lot of people would have actually had to think twice if that was their culture, as to actually not, there's fear against going against authority. You are voting against a government if you decided to vote against them. So I think that was used. But anyway, at the end of the day, the campaign that I was running on was a campaign based around integrity. Obviously, I'd seen a lot of activities from the Liberal Party which were totally disgusting, but they relied on a legal exemption that they're allowed to be misleading and deceptive, other than in relation...
I was getting disgusting behaviour thrown at me. It was crazy.
But anyway, so in the signs, I said, no, that's enough. We'll take you to court in relation to that. And so that's what we did. So we went to the High Court, and the High Court sent it to the Federal Court, a full Federal Court, so 3 judges. They listened to the case with, a fair independence, I must say. I was, pleased with the way that they listened to the case. It's a very different court case to a normal court case. You basically just have to present a portfolio, and you're not allowed to add anything more to that portfolio, and that's it.
Okay.
And the courts determined that the Liberals had engaged effectively in election fraud, so that they had been misleading and deceptive in relation to those signs. So
the Liberals had been involved in electoral fraud.
That's what it was.
And why is that not on the front cover of the fucking paper?
The result did unfortunately come out of court at 3.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
2:15 or 3:15, I think, on the 24th.
It was 2:15. Yeah.
Of December. But the way the electoral system...
Sorry, can we just rewind for a second now, because no one wants to understand what that just meant. So it came out
right before Christmas Day, when the press has already finished.
Yes, the press is closed,
gone.
And therefore no press can go out after it's been... It was all very strategic.
Well, look, I don't think it was strategic. I think, to be honest, I think the judges wanted to make sure that there was an announcement made or a decision made before they also went for a Christmas break. So I think a lot of people thought that was some form of, concocted, underhanded behaviour by the courts.
We never know, because the Liberals
but it wasn't. I don't believe it was.
Okay.
So I have... if we do not believe in our court system, then we have nothing left in the country. Okay? But what it showed is that the reason why I had to take this to court was because when it was just pointed out to the Liberals on the election morning that it was wrong, they refused to take them down. When we pointed out to the Australian Electoral Commission that this was this was voter fraud, they refused to take it down. In fact, some of the people who worked for them had ripped them down, and they were instructed to put them back up. When we went to the Australian Federal Police and asked them to investigate this because it was electoral fraud, they refused to investigate it. So we were left with no alternative. I was left with no alternative on behalf of the citizens. If you want to stop people from engaging in this activity, the Australian Electoral Commission would do nothing, the Liberal Party had no intention of doing anything, and the Australian Federal Police, who were there to uphold the laws, were unprepared to take any action. So now the court has determined and found that this has been grossly misleading and deceptive conduct. They've determined that there was one, they talk about throwing the poor person under the bus. They've determined that there was one person from the Liberal Party who was supposedly responsible. I think we all know it wasn't one person from the Liberal Party who was responsible, but they've determined one person, who happens to be Josh Frydenberg's Chief of Staff, was the person who authorised the signs, and therefore he was responsible, and it's a criminal act.
Is he going to jail?
Well, no, he's been asked to explain to the court why on the 7th of February. He needs to explain to the court again in a dossier, which everything's done in a dossier as to...
What does that mean?
Just a file. You put in the submission to the court. You say, dear court, these are the,
So you're not scrutinised. You've got plenty of time to, make something up, or...
No, not make something up. You have to explain to the court as to
why
whether they should be sending you down the prosecution path.
Okay.
If they send you to the prosecution path, then they send you to the Director of Public Prosecutions, which, unfortunately, is another government, semi-government department. So... I think the courts will do absolutely what they should do. Yeah. Where it goes to from there, I don't know. But the thing here is not, a vendetta against anybody. It's a vendetta against the behaviour.
Yeah.
The behaviour that was shown during that election.
It was disgusting.
It shocked me. I've put in a submission to the Senate committee, because there's a Senate committee looking into this. And it's still, that submission has not been released. So the chairman of the committee, it's meant to be a public committee, is Liberal. That document, I do not believe, has been made public, even though I put in a very detailed submission about all of all of the activities that I witnessed as an independent candidate at the election, which were grossly, just terrible. Frankly,
They
terrible.
were.
They were terrible. But anyway, look, that's where we are on the court case. I'm pleased that the courts obviously found that the signs were misleading and deceptive, and that the Liberal Party obviously intentionally engaged in that activity. What I am a bit disappointed is that they said that for some reason you couldn't they couldn't come to a conclusion that 550 votes wouldn't have been influenced in the seat of Chisholm, because that's all it would take, 550 votes. Now I can understand why people in potentially the Chinese community wouldn't put their hand up and say I was fooled, because the Liberal Party went out on a massive campaign to say anybody who would have been fooled is an idiot, so therefore they'd be embarrassed.
Right.
But I think a lot of people would have thought twice when they saw that sign. But the court decided that they couldn't come to a conclusion. Now, God only knows, you can't ask people, they're private votes.
Yeah.
But they come to the conclusion that not even 550 votes were disturbed by these signs that were plastered over the seats. And they weren't only plastered in Kooyong, they were plastered in Chisholm, they were plastered in 4 or 5 other seats.
Okay.
So there's a real question as to whether this election was actually, the government is actually valid. Is it a legitimate government? Did it win through electoral fraud? At the end of the day, and it's a fair thing for people to ask.
Yeah.
Because,
I was so surprised. I think a lot of people were just
there's many. I've had many other people from different areas and different seats raise similar issues, but they didn't have the guts to go through. Well, not guts, but it's expensive exercise. Yeah. It's a huge process to go and take these disputes to court.
Yeah. Emotionally,
and that's it's very tiring. You go on for an election campaign, which is an effort as it in, and then at the moment we got a result on Christmas Eve. Well, that's great. That doesn't make you feel too good for Christmas Eve, because you still got to deal with press on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And now we're still waiting around until February when we work out whether what happens with costs and what happens with where this next step goes. So what becomes a huge effort to go through an election campaign now takes a whole year and actually starts spinning into the second year. Now it's fine if you're a politician, if you're paid and you got lots of stuff.
Well,
but again, if you're independent, you've got to do all this single-handedly.
So I was going to say,
But I'm very appreciative. A lot of people donated to that campaign. So that was one of the reasons why I put it forward, because I said, this is terrible. Do you want to do it? And people donated $30,000 towards the legal costs involved, and with that feeling that other people shared that this activity was wrong, I was happy to say, okay, I'll go through the heartache of actually dragging this thing through court. So that's
kind of why I wanted to bring you on here, so that people could hear you, so that a lot of the questions that have come through, it's who do we turn to? Who are we now looking for advice from? And I want to be like you, not just because you're my dad, but because you're the man for the job. So what are the steps? We'll get into the questions in a second. What are the steps then from here? If I was to say, we want you to be the Prime Minister, what are the, but not just because you're my dad, because being the Prime Minister would be stressful as fuck. So I'm not saying I want you to go through that stress, but what I'm saying is you are fit for the job, and we need someone who's actually going to give a shit about our future, because I want to bring kids into the world. I don't want to bring kids into the current world that we live in, right? I feel like that's actually traumatizing for them. So what are the steps that you would need to take in order to get there? How can we support you so we can actually not have a country that's burnt down?
Well, look, this isn't just the question of burning down. There's a question of integrity and how people make their decisions. And, as you know, your grandfather or my father was a member of Parliament, and he explained to me a very simple decision-making process. And clearly politicians this day are not following that decision-making process, so they're not able to explain to people or talk to people about what decisions you're making. There are often some hard decisions you need to make in politics, but you need to be able to talk to people, and there needs to be a rational way you've made that decision. Okay. And he explained to me a decision pyramid that he used to use. And he'd say, well, Oliver, when I have a complicated decision in Parliament, I look and I see, well, at the top of the pyramid, I say, well, what do I think is morally right out of that? Now, no one to teach people their morals, but he says, look, at least I can start talking to people about a decision I need to make based upon that. And then you say, well, then I look at the decision and say, well, is it in the country's best long-term interest? And then instead of it's in the best long-term interest, that's great. And then what I'll do is I'll look at my electorate, which are the people who vote for me in my seat, and I'll say, well, is it in my electorate's interest? So if it's great, it's okay from a moral perspective, or it's okay from my electorate's perspective, and then you work your way down to there. And then after that decision, you get round and say, well, does it work with my party? And this is the problem, is all these decisions are being made not because they're in the right moral decision or the nation's interest, or even in their own electorate's interest. It comes around to, is it in my party's interest? But even worse is they're actually starting from the scenario, is it in my personal interest? Because my personal interest is to curry favour with the party.
Right.
So we have, what is a decision that always looks like a triangle, where you start at the top and you say, okay, I have a dilemma. We have a problem that we need to deal with. We've got an opportunity as a country to deal with. We start at the top and we explain our way down to people. You look at the decisions that are being made and you've got no idea how anybody can come up with the way these people are acting.
I cannot fathom the way that Scott Morrison is acting. Like, I actually, like, one of the comments on his Instagram was like, you know, you're not mentally fit. Like, I'm sorry, but I actually agree. I'm like, where is his conscience? How does he sleep at night? I don't understand how this man can
Let's look at the decision-making structure, okay? So what I think clearly what's going through his mind is that he does not want to, regardless of the long term, and it would be better that everybody talks about these issues, he doesn't want to talk about the fact that our climate is changing as a result of climate change, right? So these are the kind of issues that you would go through. What he wants to do is he wants to say, well, how do I minimise damage to myself and the party? And the best way to have less damage to myself is I just hide. So I don't get asked all these questions. I avoid it, and I say,
fly to Hawaii.
Well, no, fly to Hawaii, but I say it's the state leader's responsibility, or it's someone else's responsibility.
Okay, that's what he's.
Right?
Yeah.
And because otherwise you'll get asked the question, which is, you'd start at the beginning. Well, Scott, morally, do you think it is right that we are wiping out our ecosystem the way that we're doing it?
Yeah.
We're doing it in our rivers. All our fish are dying. All our natural habitat is dying as a result of increased temperatures, rapid increase in temperatures, which are creating fire risks, which are drying our rivers. You'd start at the top and you'd say, no, that's not right? So you'd have to do something, but he won't start there, right?
Got it.
And then you'd say, well, is it in the country's long-term interest?
Right. So
and
he's
the
just
answer
skipping a whole step.
Absolutely, we need to get on with addressing these issues because it's in the country's long-term interest if we have a stable environment and we keep our ecosystems strong.
Okay.
We rely on our ecosystems. But no, he doesn't want to talk about that because the party donations come from fossil fuel industries. They're the ones who are feeding money. There's a dark art here in relation to the way these parties are funding themselves. If they started at the top of the decision-making process and said, what is morally right, what is in the country's long-term interest, they would never be sitting around saying, oh, this is all about... I mean, what are they? They've come up with all kinds of excuses in relation to the bushfires because they don't want to actually say what is the long-term cause of it. Sure, lightning causes bushfires, yes. Vandals cause bushfires as well, but they're never as intense as what they
This
are.
Is out of control.
It is a result of the environment being dried out and under stress that, of course, once something starts, it burns a lot more heavily than what it does. So again, you start at the top. You start, well, is it right? And clearly destroying our environment or allowing our environment to reach such a stress level that it cannot withstand these type of events, which are normal events, is just not right.
Yeah.
And is it in our nation's long-term interest?
Fuck no.
And in fact, it's in Australia's long-term interest if all the world starts to address climate change much harder than it does, because Australia stands to benefit from climate change, from the technologies and replacing coal. So this big argument is, oh my God, if people don't use coal, Australia's going to be worse off. No, Australia will be better off if we don't use coal.
How will we be worse off?
Because Australia exports a lot of coal.
Oh.
But the issue is those countries will need to replace that power with another form of power.
Yeah.
And we can now export renewables.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yes, you can export renewables. So you can cut out, normally, as you know, how do you get to fossil fuel? How do you get to coal? Well, what happens is trees grow, sun shines on the leaves, the trees all fall. Over 40,000 years it sits under the ground. That's what coal is.
Oh, I never knew that. Okay,
What do you
cool.
think coal comes from?
I don't
coal
know.
is basically crushed down biomass, left over tree litter and stuff like that. And squished for 40,000 years you end up with coal. Well, now you can go from sunshine to basically fuel in an afternoon, right?
Yeah, wow. So you just skip all those
skip
steps.
the 40,000 years now. That technology is all available.
Okay.
And as we have the best renewable energy resources of any country around in our environment, Indonesia doesn't have it, Japan doesn't have
we're
it,
not
Korea
even
doesn't
using
have
them.
it. we're in a winning position here. If all countries had to use renewable fuels, Australia would be, a powerhouse. I mean, we'd be the Saudi Arabia of renewable fuels, right? And to think about, well, that's what it is.
That's amazing.
Saudi Arabia is the fossil fuel mecca,
Yeah.
right? Well, we've got our fossil fuels now. We go to renewable fuels. Australia is the Saudi Arabia of renewable fuels, but they can't see it that way because we don't have big companies in renewable space who are donating, so they're relying on the big money that's coming from the fossil fuel industry.
Right.
They're just retarded. They're looking the wrong way.
Yeah.
They really are retarded. They're looking the wrong way, and it's really bad for people. It's bad for the country. They're not making the right decisions because by prolonging this, you're not being honest with people who are in industries that are going to change. The coal industry is going to change. Thermal coal is going to be phased out. If you're working in an electric power station burning coal, you will not have a job in 20 years. You won't have a job.
Yeah.
So you will have to be looking and training now to ensure that you're skilled to be in the renewable energy industry. Again, that's what's morally right. You don't... But they're running on fear. It was what they're trying to do, is they're trying to tell people, if you vote for us, we'll stop change. Well, change ain't going to stop, right? It isn't going to stop. So again, it's morally not right because you're exposing those people to greater risks. So there will be an abrupt change then.
Yeah.
Nobody likes fast change. No one really likes change. It would be great if, we could all do everything that we want. Change causes issues for everybody. It changes property values. It changes everything, right? But slow change is easier to deal with than fast change. And it's the same for the environment, which is the reason why, yes, people say temperatures have changed over periods. Yes, over 40,000 years, the environment has a lot of time to adapt to 1 or 2 or 3 degrees.
Yeah.
Over 2 years, it cannot adapt to it. It dies.
Yeah.
It dies. You can't adapt to that type of level of change.
Jesus. Okay, well, let's jump into some of these questions, Dad.
Yep.
So, okay. Firstly, we'll start from the bottom. Okay, what would it take for all damage worldwide to be completely reversed? That's a big question.
The ecosystem damage?
Yeah.
Well, I think what you have to do is you have to, first of all, stop doing more damage.
Okay.
And the only way you can stop doing more damage is by actually reducing emissions, which basically stops making that blanket thicker and thicker.
Yeah.
You have to stop carbon emissions.
Okay.
You have to stop emissions of greenhouse gases. And they don't only have to be carbon, by the way. Fossil fuels are the largest contributor, but there is a lot of methane that's now being emitted into the atmosphere, and there's also a lot of nitric oxide as well. So there's 2 or 3...
Like the spray cans?
No, they're different. That's
they're different?
ozone depleting. But,
it's different. Okay.
Yeah, that's different.
Okay, all right. So with that question, I feel like a lot of people just sit in that helpless of like, okay, well, I turn my lights off when I leave. Like, I'm doing what I can. So how can they do more? We've had this conversation, like, voting, basically. How can they do more?
Well, if they're in a house, they should have solar power on their rooftop one. Mm-hmm. And if they don't have solar power, they should be ensuring that they buy renewable energy.
Okay.
Because then that basically means they're not, when they're using electricity.
Oh, when you do your electricity thingy, you can click
choose.
renewable.
Yeah.
It's a little more expensive. It's so worth it.
Well, a lot of places it's now not. So, for example, I think AGL's offering at exactly the same price.
Oh, cool. When I was in Sydney though, Dad, I did that renewable, and it was like literally $4 extra a month. Like of course you would do it.
Well, that's right. And then you can feel like you're not damaging the environment by running your fridge or by running your heater. Yeah. Because okay, $4, okay, $5. Well, okay, fine.
That's one coffee a month. You're fine.
Well, but I still don't want to destroy the ecosystem.
Yeah.
You want to be part of the problem. So if you don't want to be part of the problem, make sure you're not. And you can do that and make that decision. And the other thing you need to be doing is trying to make sure that your house doesn't run on gas. It doesn't need to run on gas.
Okay.
Our home is 100% electric. Whether it's heating or whether it's your hot water, or it's 100% electric. Turn your gas off. You do not need gas anymore. It's inefficient to heat your house with gas. You should be using air source.
But then the whole thing is, but electricity is being run by coal, so why do we want to use electricity then?
Because you're going to make an option to tick a box and make sure it comes from renewables.
Right, got it,
otherwise, what we have is we have a lot of solar on our roof.
Yeah.
But some people don't have a roof space to do that.
Like if they're in an apartment or something.
In an apartment, but they can still make a decision that I feel more comfortable running my fridge and jumping up and down to stereo music when I know I'm not damaging the environment as a result of doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
$4 for a good feeling or $5 for a good feeling, you pay that all the time. Well, realise that not damaging the environment is a really, really important part of making sure that you're part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What are our responsibilities as a nation to other countries, especially developing countries?
Well, we have, in reality, as there's only one world we're all on, we need to recognise that if Australia wants to make sure that it's secure and safe, then it will need to make sure that its neighbours are not significantly deprived. I mean, take it to a small scenario. If you have a McMansion in a street where everyone's living in portable homes or beaten up houses, it's not going to be a very nice place to live, is it?
Yeah, no.
So the best thing you need to do is make sure that all countries actually have a real standard of living, so that they can start to then look after their own within in their own country and have a good economic life and system for themselves.
So what would be a step towards doing that?
The main thing you need to do is Australia has been, particularly since the Liberal government came into the place, what they've been cutting is foreign aid.
Right, okay.
So Australia has an obligation to give 0.07% of our GDP to foreign aid. That was what we committed to with the UN. The Liberal Party has cut the hell out of our foreign aid.
Really?
Yeah, they just cut it.
So where the fuck is our tax? Okay, well, one, I'm just pissed off that my bloody tax is going to whatever Dick Munchett's name is to go on travelling and whatnot. Where is our tax money going?
Most of your tax money, I mean, a lot of it goes towards social security. Some of it goes towards social security, which is absolutely fine.
Can you quickly explain what social security is?
Well, obviously there are some people who are not able to make enough money to live, don't have a job.
Okay, yeah, maybe.
You know, and this scenario that we're not all equal. I mean, to think that people believe that everybody's born equally. Well, some of us are slightly more gifted than others.
Yeah.
Some people have just a harder time than others.
Yeah.
We need to recognise that we're not all, individuals who are 100% equal.
Yeah.
But if we want to all go to the footy on Saturday, and expect everyone to behave in an equal fashion, and we want to feel equally safe walking on the streets, and we want to feel equally entitled to breathe the air and have fish in our streams together, and equally safe driving on the roads, then we need to think about how we equally share to make sure that people don't feel horrifically disadvantaged and aren't horrifically disadvantaged as a result of, factors that are beyond their control. So that's where some of our money goes to. I mean, the government is supposedly declaring to spend $500 billion on defence. Now, I don't know what they're going to be defending after a while, but $500 billion on defence. They would be able to replace our whole electricity system for well under $500 billion, and none of us would have a power bill at all. They're paying $500 billion on defence, and most of it's going in submarines.
What does defence do? Like military, obviously. What do they do?
Military.
But for why do they need $500 billion?
Well, the argument is that other countries are spending on defence. So this is great. This is the defence industry loves this.
Yeah.
Because what they all do together is they run a Ponzi scheme. It's a bit like CEO salaries.
Okay.
Is if one country is spending more on defence, then the defence industry calls up the other country and say, well, they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars. You better be careful.
It's like a boys' club of who's
because the thing
spending more.
It's competitive. Because if they're spending more...
That's just toxic.
Well, then they'll have better weapons than you have. So
that's
so
stupid.
The government has a responsibility, like they have a responsibility to keep us safe from climate change.
We have defence, of course.
They have a responsibility to be able to defend our country.
Yeah.
And what they're arguing is that apparently diesel submarines... diesel submarines, nuclear submarines, fine. Why would you, if you're going to buy a weapon, you get the ugliest weapon possible. The ugliest weapon is probably a nuclear submarine, but they're going to have diesel submarines. Now, everyone's got drone submarines, mini drone submarines. Yeah. I'm not sure how these $500 billion worth of diesel submarines, who have to come to the surface, by the way, they've got to come and refuel, where a nuclear submarine can stay under for months and months and months. But diesel submarines have to come and refuel, and they've got to come and take air and all types of variety of things. Why would be buying diesel submarines is beyond me, and how they think that's going to really work in an environment where effectively, like you have drones in the air, they're now introducing all foreign defence forces have all got small submarine drones. Yeah. So it's pretty hard to hide from anything at the moment. So I'm not sure whether that's going to be the greatest weapon from.
So how much money they're spending towards climate change?
Virtually zero.
Cool.
In fact, since this Liberal government has come into place, they've done everything they can to reduce investment in activities relating to climate change.
So why did they say then, on that fucking election day, why did they say they were going to do climate change stuff?
Because they can lie and cheat.
Right, exactly. Okay, because the misleading... Yeah, okay,
misleading, deceptive conduct. There's nothing... And what they're trying to argue is, that they have done stuff, that they have reduced emissions.
He brought a Woolies bag to somebody to someone he was supporting.
But Monica, there's a very clear scenario. If you're going to reduce emissions, you actually have to reduce emissions.
Yeah.
They have not reduced emissions at all. What they've done is they're saying, we've reduced the emissions that we were forecasting to put out there. So we were forecasting because, we've been chopping down lots and lots of our trees and our forests for clearing, back then in 1990, which is when we set the target. We were just going to continue, wiping the whole of Australia and turn it into, total desert by cleaning all of our trees.
Right.
That at that rate our emissions would be this high. And in comparison to what we forecast our emissions are, look how great we are.
So they're being
but they haven't
really
deceptive.
So
it's absolutely deception.
It's
total deception.
Because you can understand it because you're very you're in this. But for someone like me,
they have not reduced
I don't
emissions.
Understand it. So I see reduced emission. They're okay, and you just take that as the Bible.
No, they have not reduced emissions. Okay. The only place that there has been a reduction in emissions is in the electricity sector. So if you look at the overall economy, it's made up of electricity and transport and all these different parts of the economy, right? And they add together to make your total emissions that you're emitting, like your manufacturing sector. But there's one area where we have reduced emissions is the electricity sector.
Yeah.
And that's as a result of the arrival of renewables.
Yeah.
And we've reduced it by about 26 or 28%.
But it's not enough.
No, actually, as the other sectors have grown in their emissions, because obviously our population has grown as well, so there's more cars and there's more travel and there's more people driving around doing what they're doing, they've all grown, is that overall our net emissions haven't fallen at all. So the Climate Change Authority, which did the final report before the Liberal government came in about what needed to happen, explained to the government that electricity reductions needed to fall by more than 65% or 70% by 2030. And actually nationally emissions should have been reduced by 65% by 2030 if we were genuinely planning to be part of the global solution of trying to keep temperature rise to below 2 degrees.
But because we're not.
No, and the government just went off to Madrid. There was a conference in Madrid of all the governments to talk about, come on, we need to actually all reduce emissions.
Yeah.
Australia, Saudi Arabia, Poland, and the US were agitating, and Brazil were people who were agitating us to take no action at all.
Wow.
To stop action.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Wait, Poland?
So they're a problem because they're a coal user.
Okay. It's who's good up there? The Netherlands and Norway. They're all super ahead of the game. Or just maybe on the game.
So Australia is
behind.
not only not acting itself, it is trying to stop the world from acting.
So
the government arguments on one hand, it'll argue on one hand, we're only a small country, whatever we do in Australia won't make any difference. Well, it does make a difference if you go to international conferences when you're around with all the other countries and you're saying, we don't want to do anything, we shouldn't be doing anything.
It would make a bloody difference. Okay.
Well, it would make a difference, Monica, because if we
wouldn't have all these fires now.
No, Monica, it wouldn't make any. But if we were part of the group saying we must act globally with all other countries, then maybe some of the other holdouts would also fall in line, and we would all globally then be able to take action on climate change. Right. But instead, Australia is standing on the precipice of basically the abyss, screaming, please don't take any action. We don't believe you should take any action, encouraging other countries not to take action.
Okay, next question. Parents saying the greenies are backburning, so it's their fault. Parents are saying that the greenies aren't backburning, so it's their fault. Give me some facts to shut them up.
Well, I think the answer is the facts are pretty clear by now. If you had a backburning, there's no one who would have backburned the amount that's already been burnt today. So we've already burnt through, 4.9 million hectares. The idea that backburning would be a solution to this problem is
bullshit.
Is bullshit.
Okay.
Backburning was done a lot when I was a kid. It was very common. But the problem is backburning can only be done in certain times. Backburning is part of the solution. It's a natural part of our landscape.
Yeah.
And it should be,
How do you backburn and not let it get out of control?
Because you do it at the right times. You do it when it isn't so dry.
Got it. There's a whole art to it.
Yeah, there's an art to backburning,
Okay.
and Aboriginals used to use backburning, for farming practices. They were actually making sure that they basically manicured all of Australia's landscape was manicured through backburning practices because the traditional owners knew exactly how to go about.
Wouldn't it be
doing
interesting if you actually listened to the traditional owners of the land?
Yeah, well, that would be very useful. That they have been farming this land for a very, very long time.
A very long time. They probably know a thing or two.
They do know a lot, and we just ignore it all. But backburning doesn't deal with the environmental change that we've had. So backburning has always been part of the solution. We've used it all the time.
Yeah.
Certainly as kids, we always used to use it. And we always used holiday houses and stuff like that. Yeah. You'd always be the time of the year where everyone would go.
I remember when we were little kids. Yeah.
Okay.
Next question. I love this one. Do we all need to become vegan to really save the environment?
Look, I don't think that. I mean, that is a hard question because on analysis, emissions from the way we undertake our agricultural productivity at the moment are quite intensive. But there are other ways that you can reduce emissions. So I think that people should be conscious as to like anything in terms of what they're doing.
You don't need to have 10 steaks a day, basically.
Well, I think that's a question of like everything else. You know that when you eat steak, particularly if it comes from a feedlot, then it has high carbon. Then it actually has high carbon emissions.
Okay,
but equally, Monica, these vegans. I'm not being pig on vegans, but people.
It's right. It's my podcast.
No, that's all right. But but it is such a narrow scenario because I sit down with half these people, and they'll be drinking a bottle of water that's been brought in from Italy or from France. So the carbon emissions in that bottle of water is absolutely outrageous.
Like basically, just eat local would be a solution.
That's right. Eat local would
and
be
good quality.
That's right. Quality and eat local would be a great stepping stone in relation to this. But it's extraordinary how I don't know why the government even allows this type of bottled water to come in without
it's water. I know, it doesn't make any sense.
But if there was a proper carbon charge, then it would be charged and it would be a lot more expensive. But there is no carbon charge. But people are making, your consumers, people listening to these podcasts are making those decisions themselves. Yeah. When they go to the supermarket, they can choose something that comes locally or they can choose an imported product. What they've got to recognise is every time they choose an imported product, it's got a massive amount of carbon emissions in how that product has actually found its way to Australia. Okay. And they forget that all the time. Yeah. But they can make better decisions. Yeah. People have to start making better decisions. So it's not only good for the environment, it's also good for fellow Australians. Yeah, they'll be the ones who'll be working in the economy and our jobs, in the future.
So there is a chick that I follow on Instagram. I'll try and find her, and she talks a lot about the sustainability of farming and whatnot. It's quite interesting. But so is the carbon emission from like feedlots very different to the carbon emission of a cow that has been roaming and just like doing its thing until it gets killed to be eaten?
Look, I believe so, but I'm not an expert in
this area.
Now, I believe that because they get grain fed, is that the emissions, the way their gut works,
correct,
is the emissions. But I'm not an expert, and there's a lot higher than if they were grass.
And it's also something about the life cycle. There's a really good book called The Vegetarian Myth, and she talks about the life cycle and how because cows have 8 stomachs, they have to do that, like that, the grass has to go through in the whole life cycle, and because of the life cycle, it's better for the environment than if you're just using feedlots because there is no fun life cycle.
It would be a much better scenario if people let kangaroo steaks, to be honest.
Well, if there's any kangaroos left.
Well, they don't have 8 stomachs. Yeah. They're low carbon creatures. Okay. They're fully available. They're sustainable. They're native. They'd be delivered locally, and they're pretty tasty, frankly.
That would be better. Yeah. Maybe we should look
at
the kangaroo.
It's very lean. I mean, if you want to have meat, that's fine. Yeah. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Why is Australia still using so much coal? It's like 3/4 of our energy consumption.
Australia is using so much coal as a result of a choice. We have a renewable energy target which was put in, which this government went out of its way to reduce, which actually set the amount of renewables. So when you have these great big fat power stations, they're difficult to replace. The only way you can replace them is by encouraging another alternative to come to market, which is renewables. As those power stations are in place, it's a bit like having a taxi fleet of old Holdens. If you've got a whole bundle of old Holdens and you don't care how uncomfortable it is or how much they stink or how environmentally damaging they are or how they don't have ABS or then you don't replace them. Exactly.
Right.
You don't replace them with new. You just keep driving that piece of shit around the road.
How can we fucking force the government to either hand over his badge to you or somebody else that gives a shit? Or, like, how can we make, like I was saying at the beginning, besides the donations, how can we actually make a change?
Well, young people have the full ability to make a change. I mean, what surprised me through the election process is how easy it would be for people to start an alternative party.
Yeah.
The world doesn't need to be made up of a Liberal or Labor Party. That's just they love you to think.
Oh, is that just like a traditional thing? It doesn't have to be Liberal or Labor. It could be.
You can have multiple.
It could be the Oliver Yates party that's running Australia.
All right, you described as We Can party. Or,
I called it Give a Shit party this morning.
Shit party,
Give a Shit party. Let's make it, guys.
I Can party, or I call it what I think a Reform party.
Yeah.
If people wanted to, we could start another political party. There is no reason why you can't do it, and it's not difficult to do.
Okay.
And then you can run. Young people can actually stand in seats. We can actually go out and select people like you would for a company. I mean, running a company is like running a country is like running a business, right?
Okay.
So if I had my choice, I'd be trying to get the best people in to make sure that we can run this big company called the country or this country as a company. But that doesn't happen. Well, why doesn't it happen? I don't know. Because the vested interest of the two major parties don't want anybody to think that you could actually end up with an alternative.
Oh.
And they don't they argue.
So it doesn't have to be Liberal or Labor.
Or Greens. No, it can be.
I see. That's the reason why I didn't know this.
Well, that's the reason why I stood as an independent. Because I couldn't find myself.
But I thought at the end of the day, it was either Liberal runs Parliament, is the government, or Labor is the government.
No, most places like New Zealand, for example, they haven't had a majority government for ages. They've had to form a coalition between different parties. So you'll find this party, that party, and those ones form together, and they say, we will form government.
Okay.
And then that's great, because then you get diversity of views.
Yeah.
And you don't have this kind of pack.
So when's the next election? So
the next federal election is not for another 3 years.
So how can we boot this dude out faster? Because I don't think we'll have any land in 3 years' time.
Well, look, at the moment, the Liberal Party has a majority of 2 seats.
But what about the dude that's got the? Okay.
I was hopeful that as a result of the court case, Chisholm, which is the seat next to us, would be forced into a by-election.
Yeah.
And then people would have a choice to vote differently.
Yeah.
Having seen how bad, the effect of having these people in place yet again, and their majority would be reduced to 1.
Yeah.
However, there are other seats around where I think you may find that there are members of Parliament who are very weak.
Yeah.
And who may have reasons why they want to resign as well. And so we could have by-elections in different places.
So why are these people being pushed under the carpet, and it's not being clear that there are actually people that maybe don't want to be sitting anymore?
Well, that's because the party wouldn't want to actually go through a by-election in those seats because they could lose a seat. And if you only got a 2-seat majority, the last thing you want to do is lose a seat. So in the short term, the only way that these people will change if they realise that if they don't change, it's a threat. But the election, unfortunately convinced them that actually lying, cheating, deceiving the public was actually an intelligent strategy because they were rewarded for that strategy.
Okay,
so until such time as there is a palatable alternative and voters realise and they're not afraid.
What is the alternative?
Well, the alternative is you set up another party and voters need to understand.
But we can't wait 3 years.
No, you can because you don't have a choice. People
like we're talking about FedEx and UPS, we do have a choice.
Right, yeah, you can go through civil disobedience, which is what people like the Extinction Rebellion are doing, which is where they've got to the stage of actually now disrupting cities.
Yeah.
Because they've got to the stage where they said, well, no one listens anyway.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm forced towards civil disobedience.
Yeah.
But we are getting to that stage where the government doesn't appear to be acting in the interests of the people, and there are calls. People are petitioning. There is a petition at the moment.
Oh, really? What
to the
for?
Governor General to ask him to sack the government.
Oh, great. We need to link that. Shelby, can you link that in the description, please? Seriously, we are linking that shit.
There is a petition. The Governor-General
Okay.
won't do it.
Why not?
Because it would be against, all forms of reasonable protocol. We have to have...
I think Australia burning down is against reasonable protocol.
Stable government is important for everybody. So
is this dude stable?
I'm not saying he is stable. I'm not saying they're the best. But in a system, if you want to have a prosperous country, ultimately you need to have stable government. And I'm not saying people made their choice at the election.
I know, it's a fucking wrong one.
Exactly. So they need to actually start acting now to make sure that there are alternatives at the next election, with the same time recognising that unfortunately that stable government is actually very important to a country's well-being. Last thing you want to be is having a country where the government changes every 6 weeks, or breakfast. Every breakfast we have a new government, because you can't run a business, you can't run a company, you can't run the country if you keep changing everybody all the time.
But what if it would have just changed to you? Then it would be stable. So my question is,
it couldn't change to me. What it could do is if the Liberal Party lost a couple more seats, and the Independents,
how can we get those seats booted?
Well, that's as I said, I've been trying. There are different strategies that people could try and deploy.
Like?
Well, look, I'm not going to go into them. People.
Can we give us give us two, Dad? Come on, I know you're trying to be civil, but can we just have two that we can do to make sure that this is done? Because people are feeling helpless.
Well, to be honest,
I'm feeling helpless.
You need to cause a by-election in some other seats.
How do you cause a by-election? Can you tell that I'm your daughter?
Yeah, she's very demanding. Well, maybe you can prove that certain members of Parliament are unfit to be in office, for example, if they're found to have engaged in a crime.
Okay, beautiful. That's one person.
That's what you may be able to get rid of people if you find that they're, that they have economic interests which they haven't disclosed to Parliament. That's another way that they could be challenged.
Yeah.
So there are a variety of ways that people could be challenged, or if you find they're mentally unfit as a result of a health issue.
Yeah.
They may have a disease. And they may not be able to fulfil their role as a politician, and they may have to call a by-election. Now, hopefully you'd hope that a politician who is mentally unfit, now don't jump at Barney Joyce here, because a lot of people say he's a bit weird, but Barney's Barney, but there may well be, rumour has it, members of Parliament who are not mentally fit to hold office, and if they're not mentally fit, they should be doing the right thing and resigning and allowing a by-election to occur.
There should be. Okay, amazing. And then in terms of that whole 3-year thing, so so do we need to start the Reform Party now, so that in 3 years, so as soon as possible we can get you in Parliament?
Well, no. I think the question is that if people are asking how they do something, you got to remember that young people have the best ability to make change, but they're just not actually knowing quite how.
And that's why I wanted to get you on, because we don't understand, besides posting on social media, how to make change. Yeah,
but they can post very effectively by actually creating a party and then deliver for that party through social media. The Liberal Party or the Labor Party doesn't really have a membership base. Hawthorn Football Club has more members than either of those parties, right?
Okay, so we need to create our own give a shit party.
Yeah, exactly. And you could then go through the process of selecting candidates. You could run at council elections, you could run at state elections.
Okay.
The people tell you can't do things, right? When they tell you can't do things is because they've got their own vested interest. They want the system to remain the way that it is. They don't like change either, right? But if you want change, you have to force change. So that was what we did at the last election. We tried to put independent candidates up to try and force change. Ultimately, the electorate didn't reward us with enough votes to achieve that. But it doesn't mean that people don't want change. People actually are fed up with the two parties. They're fed up to their eyeballs with the two parties.
I'm so fucking
because they don't make a decision in a way that's logical. They won't talk to you about a decision that they're making.
They actually don't have a brain.
They just make a decision.
Where is their brain?
Yeah, but you look at most decisions they're making seem to be made as a result of, it helps their party or it helps them as individuals.
Yeah, fuck that.
It's not necessarily the right thing or in the nation's long-term interest.
Yeah.
Because short-term political interest is all they care about. They care about, well, will it make sure that I get my job? And this is all caused as a result of changes that have occurred. I mean, there is too much money in politics today that never was when my father was a member of Parliament. In the old days, you went to Parliament to serve the people, and people respected you for that.
Right, and now people are doing it to
make money.
Right, and that's where a problem's lying.
Because
they're disrespecting the money that they're making.
Well, the question is that really the right amount to make? I mean, if you're representing a group of people, don't you think the amount that you make should have a relationship to those people you're making? Shouldn't you be paid 2 or 3 times the average weekly wage?
Yeah.
Not 5 times, not 10 times.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Why does a minister get paid a 70% bonus for being a minister? So you think these politicians are on a $220,000 salary?
Especially when they're not doing their job properly. It's one thing if they were getting paid $500,000 and they were killing it.
No, Monica, but the question is the politician today, arguably, they're paid about, nearly $200,000 for a base politician. And that's what everybody thinks a politician gets paid. And you think, oh, well, that's not so much.
Okay.
But that's just not the case.
Right.
They've agreed to pay themselves a 70% bonus if you're a minister.
Wow.
And then there's allowances on top of that. So...
And they get what's with the house? They get free house and everything.
Flights and cars and everything else.
And that's all paid with taxpayers' money?
Paid with taxpayers' money.
Fucking hell.
Most politicians who are of any
I'm moving to Antarctica.
any form of substance are probably all earning over $500,000.
Wow.
Each. And
they're not showing up in that with reflective of that money either.
Also, doesn't relate to what the general population makes.
Yeah.
And so the difference between a minister and a non-minister. So if you are a minister, all you are responsible doing is for administering a department. So if you are the minister for the environment, you look after the environment department.
So it's like any sort of normal business corporate job.
Well, you've still got your day job, which is being a politician, but your additional job is to be responsible for a department.
Okay.
The department does all the work, right?
Right.
You just have to oversee that department.
You're just like basically the face of it.
You're the face and you oversee that. You don't need a 70% bonus to oversee a department.
So you're just basically the face of it. You're doing like pretty minimal work.
No, you can't do any more, Monica. Politicians do work very hard.
Yeah.
If you know any of them...
I know you work so hard.
So all of them do. They're out at fetes and conferences.
Yeah.
And,
No, I get that.
They're doing whatever they can do.
And that's why I'm saying, like...
They don't have a lot of spare time. They have zero spare time.
And that's why
it's the
I'm
most
saying,
thankless job on the planet at the moment.
And with, tying into my business, like...
jobs on the planet.
Like, people can get paid a lot of money, but it needs to be reflected in the value that they're offering.
Correct.
ScoMo or anybody of these people are not being their value isn't being reflected in the amount of money they're being paid. If they're being paid $500,000 a year, but they are fucking showing up like no one's business, that's one thing. But the problem is they're being paid a lot of money and they're not giving the value in exchange.
But it isn't so much money; it's where they actually sit. People don't do this job typically for money. At that level, a lot of them are doing it for power and position. But the problem is now money has got wrapped into power and position as well. So
okay, I see what you're saying.
Why do you find seats highly competitive, and why do people stand? If you asked somebody would they like to be a politician, everybody in the street would say,
that's
yes,
why
they would love to have a go at doing this, right?
Okay,
They'd love to actually serve their country, right, in different ways. We can all serve it. There are lots of people do. Nurses serve their countries, garbage people. There are people who actually do their job because they think it's the right thing to do. That's the least the things that they can do. So actually performing your role and performing what you're good at, if you can do it in a way that helps fellow citizens, there's nothing more rewarding than that. So it isn't money that rewards people at all for these type of jobs. It's actually making the decisions and explaining to people, and then actually people respecting you for the decisions that you've made, and understanding the decisions that you've made. And not all the decisions that you make are going to be right either. Yeah. But you can't expect them all to be right.
Yeah.
But you do have to expect people to actually answer questions. At the moment, the way the politicians work is if they don't like a question, they won't answer it.
Like this morning on the ABC, that was so funny. What were they talking about? How he grabbed that woman's arm and like forcefully made her make her shake her arm, and the guy was like, "Wasn't that a bit forward?" And he just kept saying, "I'm offering my support." I mean, he wouldn't answer the question.
Well, I mean, the problem is that's just one picky example. But the clear scenario is that he does not want to come under any scrutiny.
Anymore.
Well, and your politicians, the people who represent you, they have to be under full scrutiny all the time. It's your right as citizens. You're accountable to the people.
Yeah. You've got to be okay with it. If you don't like it, don't do the fucking job.
That's the job you take on. So transparency, in other words, being open with people and having full disclosure of what you're doing, explaining the decisions that you make. Making a mistake and resigning as a minister is absolutely fine. The way the system was designed is that if a minister oversees a department and a department does something terrible, the minister should resign because he's responsible.
And then you keep your dignity because you own up to it.
Exactly. They go and sit on the back bench.
Yeah.
And then what happens is probably after 12 or 18 months they can come back. But there has to be cause and effect. And that's, no one's infallible. People will all make decisions.
We're humans. We make mistakes
right
sometimes.
and wrong.
Yeah.
But the good part about it is you should be showing to people that
You're
I know
apologetic.
the decision's wrong.
Yeah.
And this decision was bad and I was responsible for it. So
put your ego aside. Yeah.
The issue is they don't want to have a 70% cut in salary.
Yeah, Jesus. Okay.
That's what the issue is.
Man. Okay, so next question. What is ScoMo doing wrong from your dad's point of view regards climate change?
He's not addressing climate. He was trying to ignore climate change. Okay. He's an effective climate change denier. No person who honestly believes or follows science would think that we are doing the right thing as a country if we were trying to keep temperatures below 2 degrees.
Yeah.
So we know that,
Quick pause. I know someone's going to ask this. So 2 degrees.
2 degrees.
It doesn't sound like a lot. Can you just quickly explain how 2 degrees is actually a lot, even though it doesn't sound like a lot?
If I change your blood temperature by 2 degrees, you're dead.
Okay, cool. There we go. That's great. Beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank you. Next.
Okay, so effectively, if you change, if a 2 degree temperature change wipes out the Great Barrier, 99% certainty that it will wipe out the Great Barrier Reef.
Okay.
So if you want to kill the Great Barrier Reef, 2 degrees does it.
Okay.
Okay. If you want to destroy the environment, 2 degrees does it. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you run yourself for 2 degrees hot. Fruit bats fall out of the trees and die. If they get to a certain level, they will change. It's a bit like salt water. If you think about, we can all drink a level of salt water. If you have dams and cows go up and drink from it, the cows can drink it, they can drink it, they can drink it. But they go off one threshold, a little bit higher,
and it will,
it'll kill them. Okay?
Yeah.
So because our bodies have adapted and because nature has adapted to operate within a certain range, it can only operate in that range. Now, over 40,000 years, it can adapt, okay, through generations and generations. But if you push that level so high so quickly, it will not adapt.
That's what the problem is.
And it causes death.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
So what's ScoMo doing wrong? Basically, he's doing nothing.
Science.
He's ignoring
science. So basically, he's basically sitting around saying the world's flat. Well, that's what it is. Because science tells you that it's round.
Yeah.
It's very clear.
I mean, you look at the horizon; it's pretty obvious.
Now, hopefully,
it's round.
these fires might tell him that it's round as well. Because you have to prove it to him. He won't believe the science.
Yeah,
it's not as if you have to believe science. Science isn't something you believe.
Yeah,
science is actually science. It's like maths is maths.
Yeah,
right? It's not something
you don't choose to believe in it. It's just a thing. It's there. It's not a belief.
It's not Scientology you're dealing with here.
When people say I don't believe in climate change, I'm like, climate change isn't a belief. It's a fact. You don't get to choose. Like you don't get to just be like, no, I don't accept that.
We'd all like to do nothing. If carbon emissions, if we didn't have the problem, if we didn't have this problem with this blanket building up, we wouldn't have to do anything. If we didn't have to do about the ozone layer of actually changing our spray cans, we wouldn't have done anything. But we have to. That's what science says.
Next question. What are 3 things that I can easily do every day that will help make an impact on the world? I like this. So 3 easy things. I'm going to throw in there, like, just vote properly. Like, maybe be a little bit... Follow Dad on Instagram.
Well, look. If people want to start a party, we can start a party, and then we can. If 10,000 followers decide they want to stand it, then you have got a really good chance.
Actually, I was going to say, can you all please make sure that you share this podcast, and we can do like a Google document, like a Google poll thing, and then if you click the description, you'd be able to vote in the Google poll. That'd be fun. And if you guys can share this on your Instagram story so lots of people can hear about it, then we can get some good feedback on what people want. That would be good.
So we're going into this 3 things? 3
things, yeah.
Think.
Okay, cool. That's a good one.
Okay, think.
Yeah.
So think about what you're doing and what you're doing as to whether it creates emissions and whether you've actually offset those emissions. So choose renewable energy at home.
Yeah.
Don't drink. Avoid imported stuff. Try and get things locally. And then advocate heavily for climate action.
Yeah, get involved. I mean, I will say, guys, I didn't really understand this whole political thing until Dad ran. And wow, it's really important to be involved.
Yeah.
Like, don't think someone else is going to do it. No one else is. Get involved.
Monica, you were reading me. I'm not an Insta person. I'm a Twitter person.
I know. I'm trying to get him on Insta, guys.
I know, but I think it's the other way. Unfortunately, a lot of these decisions in this world are made, unfortunately, by older people, right?
Yeah.
That's the reality that you face, which I think is wrong in the first place. But a lot of that chatter is on Twitter.
Yeah.
It isn't on Insta.
Yeah.
I think that if you were talking about, if you looked at when ScoMo posts on Insta and you look at the comments, you will start to understand how sick and annoyed people are in relation to these type of activities. So look at some of the responses that you're getting and seeing whether they resonate with you. If they do resonate with you, then realise that you're not alone. As a lot of us realise that we want a better Australia. We do. We want a positive Australia. Australia is a small country, and I was always proud to be Australian because Australia always tried to do the right thing globally.
It's interesting.
It was always like, we were the first people to bring in seatbelts. We were always considered to be great when it came around to environmental protection.
And
we were the first people to run
even when you go
Wales.
travelling, Dad, often when you go travelling, you're like, wow, you realise how good of a country Australia is. But now I'm like, thank fuck I'm not living there, which is terrible
No,
to be thinking
but
that,
our reputation is being trashed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's horrible.
Our reputation as a nation is being trashed. So our reputation is very important to us. We are still a small country in a global scenario. And therefore, being small, you have to rely on your reputation. And our reputation is being trashed. We are not playing appropriately as a global citizen. We're not using a unique position to be able to stand between large powers and smaller countries. Australia always had this unique position. It was always seen as the honest broker. And to be honest, it's a funny way to even say it. Australia is seen as totally dishonest these days. It's dishonest in climate action. It was dishonest with our neighbours when we came around to negotiating with treaties. Australia is increasingly starting to be perceived as a strange, dishonest nation. And that's not what we want. We need to actually be considered, go back to a scenario where people look up to Australia as a nation, a fair nation, a nation that thrives on equality. I mean, equality is important. I mean, equality, anybody who goes to the football realises when you go to the MCG that equality is right there in the 92,000 people or however many 100,000 people are sitting at the MCG. That's equality for you. They come from everywhere on the train. We all get off at Richmond.
It's quite beautiful.
We all go to the MCG. And that's something to cherish.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of countries don't have that type of equality. There's nothing wrong with being striving to try and be relatively equal. Some people will obviously be much better off than others because that's the choices that they make, and some of the times the luck that they've had and the fortunes that they've been able to build through maybe hard work. But the idea that you don't have reasonable equality is not right. I mean, I just find it extraordinary that it seems in this day and age as the people who make most of the money are the people who provide the services that we don't need, and the people who make the least money are the people who provide the services we do. So, the bankers of this world, and I was a banker, get paid a bucket load of money. If the bankers all disappeared tomorrow, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
If the nurses and police, who get paid very little,
and the teachers and stuff,
disappeared tomorrow, we'd have a major problem. So there's some form of inverted reality in relation to how our system is operating.
We're just not valuing things correctly, I feel like.
That's right. I think there's a disconnect.
Like, we're not valuing our teachers, but we're valuing the not Wall Street, but the Australian version dudes. Okay, next question, Dad. So, the recycling debacle in Australia, what can be done to change it?
Well, unfortunately, you have to again start with federal government policy because a lot of it comes around to commingled issues with garbage. So if you're in Europe, for example, if you have a European product, it can only be made of certain types of grades of plastic or certain coloured glass, which actually means that the recycling stream isn't messed up. But
That's
in
so
Australia,
smart.
In Australia, we just import all crap from everywhere. It's like we import... Australia is the only country that refuses to have decent fuel standards on cars. So the world's worst car engines all now come to Australia. Yeah, come to Australia because we have the worst standards when it comes around to cars because we refuse to actually have proper engine standards on our cars.
And that's the fault of the government, correct?
The government sets the fuel standards. But when it comes around to a variety of things, you can actually say that, if you want to import your Perrier, well, great, you can import your Perrier, but it can't be in a bottle of a certain colour, which actually then gets mixed into our recycling stream.
Right, and that's what the problem is.
Which causes problems. So the other issue we've basically had, I'd argue that it's semi-misleading and deceptive conduct. Everybody was arguing that we were recycling all this stuff. There was a company that I won't name because in Australia you can get sued by these type of people now. But the company was supposed to be a major recycler, and its idea of recycling was to crush it and stick it in a container and send it to Indonesia or China.
No!
Because that's classified as recycling. Because they were recycling it, Monica. They were
that
recycling.
Is so unethical.
That's Australia, mostly all of our containers. What do you think all these containers? We're a major importer, right? We bring all this these toys and clothes and shit into Australia, right? And all we do is we pack them and send them out with garbage back to China.
That's fucked.
On the basis that we're recycling. And now, not surprisingly, China has said the recycling saga is all arisen because China's now said, look, even the recycling you're sending to us is unrecyclable even by Chinese standards. It's contaminated. We won't even take your recycling anymore. We've had enough of this. And someone's gone, oh my God, I didn't know that all of our waste was going to China all of our, quote,
Bullshit,
recycling
yeah.
was going into containers. One of the largest logistics companies in Australia isn't Linfox, or one of those large transport companies. It happens to be a company you'd never think about, but it was a recycler. A recycler was one of the largest logistics companies in Australia. Moving recycling waste over to China.
That is out of control.
That's the issue. Once China cut that off, Australia's sitting there saying, well, there is no recycling industry in Australia because all we've been doing is chucking it into a container and sending it to China, and China doesn't want it anymore. Well, now we've got this issue of building up everywhere.
Jesus. Okay. Last quick questions. My dad thinks climate change is fake and is a recurring weather pattern. Can you give me a quick sentence to say to him? What would you say to him?
He thinks it's...
So my dad thinks climate change is fake and is a recurring weather pattern.
Right. Well, climate change isn't about weather. Okay.
Ooh, I like that. Okay.
Weather comes and weather goes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so a reoccurring weather pattern would be like, you could argue that, look, there have been hot spells before, right?
Uh-huh.
And there have been hot spells before, but these hot spells are hotter than the previous hot spells. So last time, it might have been 40. Well, these times it's 41 or 42 when you have a hot spell.
Yeah, I have to say,
So
I remember when we were
difference.
little, you'd get a 40-day, very, very occasionally, and it was oh my God, it's 40.
Yeah, so
and now it's 45, and you're
right.
oh.
Exactly. So there are reoccurring weather patterns. There always will be reoccurring weather patterns.
But these are too hot.
No, well, the answer is they've changed. They're less cold and they're more hot because the average temperature has risen.
Yeah.
So all you've done is basically said, well, when there was cold periods, well, now it's not freezing, it's actually 2 degrees.
Yeah.
And when it's hot periods, and when you talk about this 2 degrees, that's 2 degrees over the average. So the world has an average temperature of, say, 18, I think.
Okay.
So 2 degrees is...
20.
It's 20. Yeah, so no, 2 degrees would make that 20, right? But what you're talking about, that is 2 on 18, which is a percentage of the average. So when you get to 20, so 2 on 20, 10% of 20 is 2 degrees. No, Monica, it's 20 degrees, so the average is 18, so 2 degrees is 10%. But when you get to 40 and you say you move it by 10%, you've gone to 44. So what people don't understand is that actually changes the overall percentage change.
Okay.
So it's 4 degrees. So on those hot days, it'll be vastly hotter.
Got it.
So the weather patterns, yes, they'll always be there, but they're going to be more extreme. They'll be either less cold or more hot than they were in the last weather pattern.
Yeah.
Good on you.
Yeah.
Dad or whoever you are, you're right. You do have a recurring weather pattern, but it's just a recurring pattern, which every time it recurs, the hotter is hotter than the last hot.
Okay. So last 2 questions. What political party should be backing? It's a personal thing, I know, but it's very overwhelming. So this is what we're saying. We need to create our own political party. The give a shit party.
Look, I think that's where people are at the moment.
Yeah.
I think the Labor Party was perceived to be a party of environmental consciousness, but it seems to have now drifted away from that after the election, thinking that it lost the election based upon taking a moral stance on climate change.
Yeah.
Where it didn't lose the election on that. It lost the election as a result of,
and now there's been misleading, more criminal activity.
Like, the franking credit story and, a few bad there were a few bad policy mixes in that saga, and they were a bit confident, I think, in relation to the end of the day. So I don't know. I don't think that
we need to create a new one.
I think we need to, and we need to think about is do party systems work? They're not delivering the governments that we want.
Yeah.
So this idea of having Liberal and Labor, is that a system that's delivering the outcomes that we want? And the answer is no.
No.
So you can do something else.
Create something else.
We can end up with 5 parties, and they have to form a coalition.
Like New Zealand.
Like New Zealand, or like many countries have coalition governments.
Guys, we need to start our own party. Okay, but you have to run it, Dad, because I don't have time to run it. Okay. What is the next step with helping the fire crisis happening right now, sad face?
Well, unfortunately, it's all a little too late. These fires are going to burn horrifically. The government had the option to take earlier action in terms of bringing in extra water bombers. They had the ability to mobilise the military earlier than what they did. They elected not to do that. unfortunately, like a fire, fires are very difficult at this stage of that nature to put out. They will continue to burn, and they will continue to do enormous destruction as they burn. And unless you can conjure up rain, and significant rain, then there is nothing that's going to change it. But the weather forecast was always for this to be an extended hot period, and without
it was
a lot of
ignored.
rain. And it's been, this was... So, unfortunately, the science tells you, and told you a long time ago, that this was going to be a problematic summer, like a drought-ridden summer. And if you want to put fires out, you need water. It ain't very helpful to be trying to put fires out in a drought-ridden summer. So,
okay, so it is too little, too late. But what can we do?
Well, I don't understand why, for example, if we have a defence force, why. Look, they may not be in there dealing with the front of the fire because you may need trained firemen, but they could be dealing with the mopping up operations to try and clean them up once they are under control. You could start moving the firefighters to where the fronts are. Yeah.
What about flying more of those planes with the water bombers?
So Australia has planes sitting on the ground.
Still?
Yep, they're still sitting on the ground at Richmond Air Force Base. They're C-130 Hercules aircraft, which they cost between $1 and $2 million to put in a firefighting unit at the back, which could then be used to deploy at the fires. Equally, I think someone rang up the US Forestry Department that have 8 of them ready equipped to go. They could have been flown here in 2 days. So they are fully available.
This makes me so angry. It makes me so angry. So how can we get
there's 77
Scott Morrison, Dick Muncher to come over to do it?
There's 77 firefighting planes on the ground in Europe.
So how can we get these aircrafts over here dumping water on the fires?
Well, it would have been a telephone call.
So how can we pressure ScoMo to actually get off his ass and do something, pick up his hand and phone someone?
I think there's a lot of... Well, I only follow Twitter. Yeah. But there's been a lot of discussion about, this, but a lot of people are thinking it is too late. I mean, even firefighting... When you have it's a bit like dealing with a house fire, right? Yeah. If you have a house fire and it's in one room, that's...
containable.
Right? You can deal with that, right? Yeah. When the whole house is on fire, you can have the fire truck holding there with a hose and it ain't going to make any difference. In one room it can make a difference. When the whole house is on fire, your hose ain't going to be big enough.
Well, this is my thing. You're seeing these firefighters with these hoses and I'm like, dude, the hose ain't doing anything. These fires are roaring.
That's right. They're not doing anything, Monica.
They're not. It's wasting more water. Almost.
Well, it's not wasting water, but the question is like, what are you doing? So if the ecosystem's now been smashed and the animals now have no water and it hasn't rained and they can't get any foliage either, there's no green grass, so how are the even animals getting any moisture? If anything lived, whether it be a lizard or an animal, if anything's left after that...
It'd be a fucking miracle.
Yeah, no, but there are things that are alive, but there's no water for them either. Right. So, I don't know, people have got to be productive here in relation to...
So we need to get ScoMo to put down his fucking ego and get Europe to bring over their planes and to America to bring over our planes.
Well, no, at the moment, I think you've almost passed that point. These fires are that extent.
Oh, so even the planes might not...
The planes would be good for the purposes of minimising loss of property, as in houses, because you could water bomb housing areas. Okay. But in terms of the loss of the ecosystem and our forests, this is almost a write-off. And then the unfortunate is that people aren't thinking about, well, what's left there, and should they be out hosing, providing water troughs or something to the animals until such time as we get a break in the rain.
Lots of people have been saying, make sure you leave water out and stuff in your houses for animals. Koalas like coming in people's backyards and whatnot.
That's right. Well, they could be actually setting them up along the sides of roads. They could be doing something productive. People want to do something, but they feel that they can't. But they can. I don't know. Okay. With some leadership, there's a lot that could be done.
Okay, so just to end this off on a positive note, what we need to be doing is not voting for Liberals and creating our own Reform Party, so using your vote because that's really important. We can also be leaving bowls of water out, like dog bowls of water out for koalas and whatnot on the street or outside the front of your house.
Well, yeah, but again, if the government could basically do a deal with Bunnings and say, everybody, you can go into Bunnings and
get free things.
And you can go and pick up these things and this is how you install them wherever you are. Right. And you can also buy, like the Farm Express, you get these crates which are...
Oh, like those tub things?
Yeah, the big... but we could, people want to do things and they should do things. And look, if 2 more lizards survive, well, that's a pair of lizards. Well, we may be able to have a thing. So to say nothing works, it makes no difference. It was a bit like when all the fish were dying in the rivers because of lack of oxygen. All they needed to do was they could have taken those water pumps, those irrigation pumps, and turned them around so they pumped water out of the river and threw it in the air and put it back in the river, and it would have
Put oxygen through it. Wow.
But
that's simple.
No leadership. No leadership. The government could have said, we're going to deal with this meter issue in relation to your water pumps. We'll deal with the electricity issue, but you have to start pumping water out of the river and returning it aerated back into the river to try and keep some of our native species and our fish alive. But they don't think.
Right. So I know,
and people say it's all pathetic. It won't work. And the answer is, well, it will work.
If 100,000 people did it, it would work.
It's worthwhile trying, isn't it?
Yeah,
so what's your alternative here?
I know.
What's your alternative?
Sarah also talked about, you need to write to your local politician. Does that actually work if they just throw the fucking letter in the bin because they don't give a shit, one? And two, in terms of pressuring ScoMo to do something or anybody to do something, what would be the best way for us to pressure him into actually giving a shit? I really like the name of this political party, Give a Shit. I'm totally rolling with it, guys.
Well, you would hope that the politicians will be taking a view. I think ScoMo will be taking a view that sooner or later, rain will come and people will forget. You need to pledge to him that you won't forget. That you will vote differently at the next election, and regardless of what spin and crap they tell you at the next election. So
we need to start a petition?
Well, you can start a petition or you can make it your own decision. I mean, the question is...
Let's start a petition. I'm going to get Shelby to start one and we can all sign it.
Well, that's it. You can start that, but equally people can make a conscious decision now at this time and say to themselves they're not going to change that decision regardless of the circumstance, is that this has just gone too far, and hold themselves accountable to make sure that they vote in a certain way at the next election. And hold themselves to it. Write themselves a note. Write themselves their own pledge. Well, I think
pledge
to vote differently.
This is what I'll get Shelby to do is make this pledge where you sign it, and it's like your own.
And if you're going to say
pledge.
anything to your member of parliament, do you know what you say to him? I voted for you last year. If you did, and I guarantee you, and I pledge, I will not vote for you at the next election unless there is the following, unless you take climate change seriously. Yeah. Okay. So this and here is my
they could be
pledge.
Misleading and deceptive about it because they told us they were taking it serious.
Hopefully, people are not going to fall for the same trick.
Than they did last time.
And politicians rely on people falling for the same trick every time.
Let's all vote for Dad, guys. That's the solution here. That is the solution. That's a long podcast. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dad.
No worries.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you got lots of chicken nuggets out of today's episode. I would be really, really grateful if you'd be able to leave me a review and a star rating that you think is appropriate, hopefully 5. And if you could share this podcast so that I can help more women live a life of flow and ease, I would be so fucking grateful. Make sure you tag me in it on Instagram so I can personally thank you, because I know so many of my clients have found me literally because their friends have posted about my podcast on their Instagram story. And I just want to help as many women as possible. So by you sharing it, I would be so fucking grateful, and I'm sure your friends would be too. If you do want to work with me, please do check out my website for all those details. And of course, you can DM me on Instagram with any other questions. If you have any podcast things you want me to talk about, any ideas, any feedback, I am always open to it, and I always love hearing what you guys have to say. So please don't hesitate about that either. I will catch you on the flip side. Have an amazing day or night wherever you are.